anytime you live in an environment where all kind of things are going on, trauma and stuff going on, y'all, this don't even get activated. Every now and then it may get activated. That's why you need to go to therapy so they can give you those tools and stuff and help you with that. But yeah, and so you'll see it a lot in kids and you'll see it in adults too. You ever see somebody just so mad that they don't even hear you? You're trying to get them to calm down and reason, and they can't reason. And their response to whatever made them mad or unhappy is over the top. This is not working. Baby, if you go home and put yourself in timeout, if you're not having a good day, don't you go mess up somebody else's day. Once again, welcome back to the Kitchen Table Podcast, where I'm Jannetta Brass, your host, LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. And the podcast is always going to be centered around mental health and parenting. So last week we discussed about how childhood impacts mental health. And so some of the things that I just kind of want to just kind of wrap it up, just making sure that you guys take notice of what's going on with your kids and being emotional available for them. So if your parents were never emotional available for you, you would know what that looks like. So I'm going to encourage you to go and get a therapist yourself. And then making sure that you guys go and sign up for parenting class, because we are tired of doing our best. We need to do better. And if you want to do better, you'll go and educate yourself, get the tools and the skills that you need to do something different. Einstein said this. He said, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a change. So if you're wanting a change and you wanting to be the best mom, you got to change up what you're doing. So that means going to enroll in a parenting class. And by the way, I do give free parenting class. I am in the 5th week. I have a 6 weeks class. I got 2 6 weeks class. One is focusing on the foundation. It is a foundation of parenting, and it is evidence-based. Erik Erikson, 8 stages of developmental. And we only deal with the first 6 stages because those are the stages of the child's life, and the rest of them deals with adults. So I do have that. We have assignments. It's an interactive course. It's over Zoom. No matter where you're at in the world, you can attend. And I will give you information as we get closer to starting the new class. And then I also have one that is called Kids Safe. And this class focusing on creating an environment where your kids are safe. And we focus on abuse, whether in neglect, whether it's physical, mental, or SA. We do focus on that, and what are the red flags and conversations and stuff that you can have with your kids, and also books and stuff that you can start reading, to your kids. Because in today's climate, you need to start reading this stuff while you are carrying them, while they in your womb. Yes, so it's a lot of books and stuff. I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to get on to what we're getting ready to talk about. But when it does come to SA with kids, 99.99%, it is never a stranger. If it's a stranger, it happens one time, and it's an assault, and it's not abuse. Most times, it is a family member or a close acquaintance with a family member. And in that particular course, I give you signs and red flags that you should be looking for, but I'll also teach you what makes that child vulnerable to predators. And once again, it all goes back to parenting. Yes. So we'll talk about that at a later date. But today we're going to be talking about trauma and the different types of trauma. And the reason why I want to do this, because we need to understand trauma, the types, and the psychological effects that it has on us. And so trauma, what is it? It is a psychological impact in real life experience Um, and understanding this matters for our personal growth, for parenting skills, and for relationships and just being overall healthy. So, what is trauma? Just got to saying it. Trauma is a psychological and emotional response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event. Um, the key characteristics. Let's start off with the key characteristic of psychological trauma. Overwhelms a person's ability to cope. It leaves lasting emotional, mental, and sometimes physical effects. It can impact self-perception, relationships, and sense of safety. So some of the common emotional reaction is fear, shame, anger, guilt, and helplessness. I'm gonna trail off just a little because I want to bring something up. But the last what 6, 7 years, maybe 10, and we almost there. We have been on the thing with the women. Let me think of the name of it, and the essay that has been going on with women. And so there has been a movement and there has been awareness. What is the name of that? Let me look at it. My mind just slipped. So yeah, y'all getting the raw, real stuff. I'm not making nothing pretty. Let me see. Um, the Me Too movement. That's what it is. The Me Too movement. And a lot of people be like, why they wait now? You know, why they wait all these years? Why they didn't say when it happened? And a lot of people like, oh, they lying. They just want to be on the bandwagon trying to get some money. Let me tell y'all something. If you've never been a victim or a survivor of SA, you don't know the mental toll that it takes on you. One of the first things that you deal with is shame and you blame yourself. And a lot of people don't say anything because every time they speak up, they're not believed and they blame them and they protect the predator before they would attack the victim. And then they make the victim feel what they already feel, that they're the cause of that. And because of that, they carry that. And it does impact you in a not so good, healthy way. And you only can suppress it for so long and it comes out and it does not come out pretty. But it does have a negative impact on how you see yourself, the world, and how you even interact and treat people that surround you. So I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to move on. But we're going to get deeper into that when I talk about that subject. Let's see. Common emotional reactions: feeling shame, anger, guilt, and helplessness. Feeling disconnected or numb, and numb is a feeling. And re-experiencing distressing memories or nightmares. So how trauma affects the brain. The amygdala, it is an emotional response and it goes into overdrive. And it's what activates the fight, flight, or freeze. You're going to do one or all of them. So this prefrontal cortex up here, the logical reasoning, it struggles to regulate your emotions. And what happens that it shuts down. And I'm not going to get too deep in this because I do give a mental health training and I go real deep into this in my training. But when you live in a traumatized environment, the prefrontal cortex, it never activates or it doesn't activate a lot. So anytime that you're dealing with children or adults and they are in a de-stressing situation and you can't talk to them, you can't reason with them, It's because this is not working. And the prefrontal cortex, what it does, let me give you an example. So take, for instance, that I cooked dinner and I have dessert. And y'all know that sugar is my addiction. And I want to eat half of this pound cake before I eat my dinner, right? But I know that if I do that, I'm not going to eat my dinner and my dinner is more healthy. So I decide, let me eat my dinner, and then therefore I'm not going to eat half of the pound cake. I might, cut a little sliver of the pound cake because that's more healthy for me. I was able to logically make that decision because it was my prefrontal cortex. It was working. So anytime you live in an environment where all kind of things are going on, trauma and stuff going on, y'all, this don't even get activated. Every now and then it may get activated. That's why you need to go to therapy so they can give you those tools and stuff and help you with that. But yeah, and so you'll see it a lot in kids and you'll see it in adults too. You ever see somebody just so mad that they don't even hear you? You're trying to get them to calm down and reason, and they can't reason. And their response to whatever made them mad or unhappy is over the top. This is not working. Law enforcement, I just want to educate y'all on when y'all out there in the public, what is not working. I got a mental health course for y'all too, but I'm going to get off of that. But yeah, in another effect of the brain is the hippocampus. So it's the memory process, and it may distort or block trauma memories. So all that has a effect on your brain. Now, remember, you guys, I want y'all to go and do the research. Go and research what all three of them does, and you can research and go a little bit deeper into how it impacts your brain. And a lot of things may make sense, and it'll turn the light bulb on you and give you that aha moment that, everybody used to have when we used to watch Oprah Winfrey back in the day when she had her talk show. Types of trauma. We have acute trauma. That means trauma that just happened immediately. And it can be a single distressing event, a car wreck, natural disaster, or assault. It just happened. It wasn't like you was walking and somebody physically or whatever assaults you. You were driving along the freeway, being safe and stuff, and all of a sudden something just hit you from the back or the side. So that is something that happened real fast. It also can develop into PTSD if it's not resolved. So, if it's not resolved in 30 days, anything 30 days, anything beyond 30 days after the traumatic event now qualifies for the diagnosis of PTSD. Chronic trauma is something that slowly happens. It's consistently happening. And it is ongoing exposure to the stress, such as domestic violence, ongoing bullying, anything that keeps you in distress, being constantly essayed as a child or even an adult, that is what we would call chronic trauma. And it can lead to persistent anxiety, always worrying, on edge, mind never just really settling, but always worrying about things. It can lead to depression, keeping you in a dark space, not wanting to be active, participating in life and being social. And it also can cause you emotional numbness. So you hear people as like, oh, I don't feel nothing, or I don't know how to feel. We'll talk about that later in another podcast. But yeah. And then we have complex trauma. Now, complex trauma, anybody can have it. Anybody can have trauma, period. But when it comes down to complex trauma, you will see that a lot in Black and brown communities. So you have to understand that being Black and brown in America is very challenging. And we know that when we leave our homes, if we go into work, if a policy is changed or is a new one is introduced, most times, not all the time, hear what I'm saying, you guys, most times, it really does not have us in mind to for the betterment of us. We know that laws are always changed, and most laws that are changed does not have us in mind. Most of them, and go and do your research. I wish everybody stopped listening to news media. I think people fell asleep in civic class. Go do your research. But most laws that are made does not have Black and brown people in mind. And they do have us in mind, but not in a positive way. It is to keep us suppressed. So we know that in any given day when we walk out that door, anything can change and anything can happen. And so anxiety in our community, those numbers are extremely high because of that. And then you living in a house, and when you have parents or a parent that don't know how to regulate their emotions in a healthy thing, in a healthy manner, they don't have the healthy tools, just not for themselves or even for their children. Anything can happen that is not healthy. So I like this. I'm not even going to go that deep. But yeah, so our trauma is complex. So we have family trauma. And then we have the trauma with America, because Black and brown people has been in a psychological abuse relationship with America, and the way that we have and continue to be treated. Has it gotten better over the years? Yes, it has, but we still have a long way to go. And right now in today's climate, it seems like it wants to go back. And so I'm just going to say that much. But it can be very, very challenging dealing with complex trauma. It leads to long-term issues like trust, identity, and emotional regulation. So developmental trauma, that trauma is early childhood affecting emotional and brain development, often due to inconsistent caregiving, abuse, and neglect. It can lead to attachment disorders and difficult in forming healthy relationships. Secondary trauma is experienced by caregivers, therapists, first responders, meaning that you have trauma. And let's give you an example of first responders. So we'll use law enforcement. They get called out to a call, and it may be a scene where there may have been a homicide that has happened. And going into that and seeing all of that, and you actually have to see the person that is no longer, present anymore, and all of the trauma that they had to deal with, seeing it, not being there, but coming and seeing it. And then sometimes you have to discuss these cases as you're in doing investigation. So you may not have been there, but just talking about the trauma that happened during this crime, the extent of it. That is what we call secondary trauma. As therapists, I specialize in trauma. So when I have clients and they telling me about traumatized situation that has happened in their lives, I could possibly experience secondary trauma. That's why if you a therapist and you specialize in trauma, you got to have thick skin to do this. You can't do this without thick skin. So that's what secondary trauma looks like. And what it does, it leads to compassion fatigue. It leads to emotional exhaustion and burnout. If you constantly always dealing with that, whether you're a law enforcer, whether just look at the firemen and women, having to go out to these calls because the house or a building is on fire, and then they have to go in and they have to go and try to rescue the people that did not get out. Can you imagine? Because after a certain level, they can't go in because it's no longer safe. It's a lost cause. Can you imagine what goes on with them mentally? Not able to save someone that was in a fire that they were called to. So that's what we call second. And so talking about that with your peers and with your superiors, and you have to do the investigation, and hearing about that is what secondary trauma looks like. Then we have generational historical trauma. And this is stuff that's been passed down through generations. So once again, Black and brown people, slavery, passed down through generations. And so there was a lot of psychological trauma to put fear in us so that we can obey the slave masters, so they can have that control over us. People who went to war, and people who are forced to be displaced, those are all different type of generational and historical trauma showing up as a inherent fear, mistrust, and survival-based behavior. That's how it shows up. Medical trauma due to serious illness, surgeries, medical neglect. It all can lead to fear of doctors, hospitals, medical treatment. Once again, we go back to the Tuskegee experiment. And I think they made a movie out of it called Mrs. Evers Boys, where they were injecting the Black community with syphilis. And they were denying them treatment because they wanted to see what every stage looked like. What was the symptoms in every stage? So a lot of people died from that. A lot of women and men was sterile because of them being withheld without treatment. And so when we talk about going to the doctor and stuff, that's a strong possibility why Black people in the Black community don't have a lot of trust with our doctors, because there's always things that's, going on. So the other one is the psychological effects of trauma. So that will be, one of them is post-trauma stress disorder, and the symptoms of having flashbacks about it. You avoidance, meaning that you're not going to go around the place or the people or the area where it happened, because if you go around it or near it, you are going to be triggered, and it's going to trigger those flashbacks, and being hypervigilant and having nightmares. And you also can develop after acute chronic, and it can become complex, meaning you had so many different type of traumas that's going on or that had went on that is complex. So I'll get a little bit deeper into that later on. So disassociation and depersonalization. So feeling detached from reality or oneself, a coping mechanism when trauma is too overwhelming. So I had a friend years ago. She talked about her being raised by her grandma, and her mom was in the streets doing whatever. So she got taken away, and her grandma raised her. Her grandma was not nice, and there would be times that her grandma would take a 2x4 and she would hit her on the legs because she had to walk in a way where she could hear her. And if she hear her walking and she walking too hard, that was a trigger for the grandma. And the grandma just did all kind of stuff. So when she would get upset and angry with her, she would get severe punishment with a 2x4 on the bones in front of her legs. And so what she did to cope with that, she will literally leave her body and she watches her grandma do what she do, and then she comes back to her body. And so this is an example of that, and you guys can go and research disassociation and depersonalization so you can see what it is and some of the symptoms of that. So that's what she used to cope with that, because it was so overwhelming for her emotionally and the pain physically. Anxiety and depression, constantly fear, worrying, sadness. It all can lead to self-isolation and difficult functioning. And then we have the attachment and relationship struggles, difficult trusting people, fear of abandonment or emotionally unavailable, self-sabotaging behavior, unhealthy coping mechanisms, substance use, self-harm, and avoidance of responsibilities or opportunities. So these are some of the things that we talk about when we talk about the psychological effect of trauma. Let me just read this little case study about a surviving childhood trauma. So we're going to keep using Miss Cornbread, okay? So I don't think anybody name their kids Cornbread, or I don't think adult name is Cornbread, because I don't want y'all to be like, oh, she was talking about me. No. So Miss Cornbread, she's a 32-year-old woman. She grew up in a household where she faced emotional neglect and verbal abuse. Her father was often absent, and her mom struggled. I think this is the same one that I just read. Her mom struggled with untreated depression. So from a young age, Miss Cornbread felt invisible, and she believed she wasn't worthy of love. So the trauma impact: as a child, she developed chronic anxiety, and it felt responsible for keeping the peace in the household. As a teenager, she struggled with self-esteem, feeling unworthy of friendship and love. In adulthood, she had trust issues in relationships, often choosing emotional, unavailable partners. And at work, she suffered from perfectionism and an intense fear of failure. And then she occasionally experienced flashbacks when she was dealing with authority figures, linking them to her childhood fear of disappointing her mom. And this is so ever more true. I find this a lot in a lot of my adult clients, especially when it comes down to even parenting their kids. They really not parenting their kids. They parenting the little girl, the little boy that was hurt. And so what I have to explain to people is this. One reason why it's important to get mental health treatment and to get those different lenses is because there are some similar situations that may happen to you, and it's close similar to the person that caused the pain and the hurt. And what you have to understand is everybody's heart posture is different. And if you don't understand it, like, yeah, this is similar, but this is my boss. And my boss has my best interest. And this is the reason why they doing it versus, ooh, I'm having a flashback. This is like my mama. And I'm not even looking at you as my boss, or I'm not looking at you as a trusted friend. I'm looking at you like you my mama because you just triggered something that you did, something that you said. And so now I have this flashback, and now I'm feeling unsafe. And now my response is going to be over the top because you're going to respond to them in the way that you respond to your mom. And so it's very important to know that, yeah, in life, you're going to experience some similar or same situations, but you have to decide, was the heart posture of the person or the people, was it to cause harm to you, or was it because this is what they did to help you? You got to be able to discern the difference. You need that lens to do that, because if not, you're going to always be isolated. Y'all trust me. When you don't go and get help and get healed, you become bitter. Nobody wants to be around a bitter person. And when you bitter, you by yourself, because every time somebody's around you, you don't have nothing good to say about nobody, nothing, anything, everything negative, 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 negative. but you know all the solutions and have all the answers, and then been in everybody's position. Nobody wants to be around that type of energy. So you find yourself being alone all the time. And that's the worst thing to be, is to be bitter. Healing journey, therapy, and self-reflection. Miss Cornbread started CBT to identify negative thought patterns. She learned that DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, skills for emotional regulation, and she also recognized the inner child wounds and began to self-compassion exercise, building strong, safe relationships. Miss Cornbread, she sought for healthier friendships and a mentor who models positive support. I'm going to say that again. She sought out healthier relationships and mentors that modeled positive support. So you do need those people around you that's going to model the behaviors and the skills and the tools that you need and what it looks like, because that's how we learn the most. She also started practicing setting boundaries. That's going to be a whole nother podcast. I'm excited about that one, the setting boundaries. And she also expressed her needs without being fearful. Healing the nervous system, practicing grounding techniques, breathing exercise, and mindfulness, and engaging in trauma-informed yoga. And I know some people said that it is from the devil. I want you to go and do your research as far as the mental and the physical health benefits that you have with yoga. Yoga helps release that stress out your body. It helps you be more relaxed, and it moves oxygen to every organ in your body. And oxygen kills cancer cells. You don't believe me? Just go and do your research. Please go do your research. And I'm talking about the when it started and the medical and mental benefits that it has. So, and it also helps you to reconnect with your body. Growth and empowerment. So after 2 years of her being consistent in therapy and doing self-care, Miss Cornbread noticed significant process. She became more assertive, experiencing less anxiety, and formed a stable romantic relationship. She also learned that trauma doesn't define her. Being healed is a continuous process. So I like that, because sometimes we will define who we are by what we've been through. And sometimes people do that their whole life, that for them not to do that no more is scary. So bitter people hold on to things that has happened to them their whole life. It shapes who they are, how they feel. Remember, they have a whole bunch of negative energy. You don't want to be around them. So for them to go and get help because they held on for a long time, it causes an emptiness in them. And they have identified themselves with that. And it's scary for them to let go, because then what's going to fill that in? So, how to heal from trauma. Recognizing your trauma response, your fight, flight, or freeze response. Noticing your triggers and your emotional patterns. Seeking support, therapy, get support groups, and trusted communities. Practical coping strategies, journaling, learning about mindfulness, grounding techniques, reparenting the inner child. That is also a book. And I would encourage you guys that did not have healthy relationships with your parents to please go and pick up that book. And what it does, it helps with self-love and affirmation. The role of self-compassion. It means that you're shifting from blame to self-acceptance. So sometimes you just have to accept what happened. We can't never get up spilled milk. But what you can do is learn. So next time, if you in these situations or whatever, you know what you need to do. So yeah, you can't never get up spill milk. And then allowing yourself to feel and process your emotions without judging them. It's okay to feel and process those emotions without judging them. So some of the key takeaways that I want to take away from this particular podcast is trauma comes in many forms and it does affect people differently. So it's kind of like this. People crack me up when they say, oh, the same thing happened to me and I went through the same thing, but this, that, and the third, and I don't know why she having a hard time. You ever been in a car wreck? You guys can be in the same car wreck and we can say the same thing. We all grew up in the same household, had the same set of parents. So you all can be in the same car wreck and it impacts everybody differently. Somebody can walk away with no physical scars, but mental scars. Somebody can walk away but have both physical and mental scars, vice versa. So everybody's impact is different and how people handle it is different because we come from different backgrounds. And so because we come from different backgrounds and our upbringings are different, everybody's not going to respond the same. And that's okay. There's no like cookie cutter how things should be. As long as it's healthy and you have a plan and you working with mental health professionals, you'll be okay. Everybody has their own path and they have their own way of dealing with things. So there's nothing set in stone about how it should look. Healing is possible through awareness, therapy, and supportive relationship, and your story is valid. And you are not alone in your journey. So you're always going to make sure that you do have a supportive group of people around you. And so if you recognize signs of a trauma within yourself, take the first step towards healing. Sharing your thoughts and experience. Healing happens in communities. One of the things that I like when I get clients, and this is one of the reasons why I specialize in trauma, is because, for one, I've experienced a lot of childhood and adulthood trauma, and I want people to see what hope looks like. You can have a prosperous, happy, joyful life if you do your work and you go get help. You can have a good, happy life. You do not have to let trauma have a negative impact on you. So when people come to me, they see what hope looks like. And then the ability for me to be able to relate in situations that we've experienced, some same and some similar, I don't know, it brings some type of comfort because you'd be like, ooh, because sometimes you feel like you're the only one. And I trust you. Trust me, you're not the only one. A lot of us experience a lot of things similar or the same. And if this episode, if it resonates with you, consider reaching out to a therapist or a support group. Go and get help. You can follow up with my podcast, the Kitchen Table Podcast. So for more discussions that we would continue to have on mental health, make sure that you send in your questions for future episodes. And our next episode, we will probably talk a little on breaking generational traumas. I think that will be good for us to talk about. But if you need help, go get help. If you have an SI thoughts, go call 988. And if you in the Tulsa area, go pick up the phone and call COPES. Your life matter, you matter, and you do have purpose. In the words of the late Lathan Archie II, there is purpose in pain. You are needed, and there is a purpose. And in the words of Tabitha Brown, you have a good day, but if you're not having a good day, don't you go mess up somebody else's day. And in my words, go get somewhere and put yourself in timeout until you calm down and can reconnect in a healthier space. And until then, I will see you guys next week.